This is The Beneath, a collection of odd tales. A Boohouse Books production. Created and narrated by Mark Steven Nordlund. Boohousebooks.com. Water does not argue. It does not knock. It waits in foundations and beneath docks, inside pipes and behind reinforced glass. We build beside it, over it, above it. We baptize in it, bottle it, insure against it, celebrate on top of it. We tell ourselves it's contained. In reservoirs, in towers, in tanks as thick as concrete. We call it resource, recreation, renewal. We trust the boundary where shoreline meets land. But water remembers the shape of what it once held. It seeps where structures weaken. It rises when weight shifts. It accepts what is offered. Grief, first laughter, forgotten promises, and gives nothing back unchanged. These stories are not about storms. They are about stillness, about surfaces that look stable, about communities that believed the lake was scenery, the tower was secure, the bottle was harmless. Water does not need to rage to take something from you. It only needs time. Story 1. The Clean Line. The ocean started being helpful on a Monday. That was the first thing people said, like help was a setting the world could toggle on if it felt guilty about the last few decades. The morning tide came in slow and polite, and left the beach looking organized. Not clean in the way a volunteer beach crew cleans, with trash bags and sunburned optimism. Clean like someone with gloves had sorted the mess by category and placed it where it belonged. Plastic bottles in a neat line, caps all facing the same direction. Fishing line braided into coils like rope. Aluminum cans stacked in short, careful columns. A shoal of flip-flops arranged by size, toe end pointing towards the dunes as if waiting for feet. A seagull landed beside the display, stared at it, and lifted one bottle cap in its beak like it was considering a tip. By noon, someone had made a post. Ocean is cleaning itself. Video attached. Thousands of likes. The comments were predictable in a way that made Mara feel older than she was. Mother Nature is healing. We don't deserve this. About time. Maybe stop littering then? LOL. She watched it from behind the counter at Harbor Grounds, the coffee shop that faced the boardwalk. The video was shaky and too zoomed in, but you could still see the lines, the stacks, the almost loving attention. It looked less like cleanup and more like curation, like an exhibit. Her coworker, Denny, leaned over the phone and squinted. That's not real. It's real, Mara said. That's our beach. That's not real behavior, Denny clarified, as if the ocean had been violating policy. You're telling me the sea woke up and chose organization? Mara looked through the window. Beyond the boardwalk, people were already gathering. They stood in a loose semicircle around the morning's offerings like pilgrims, taking photos, stepping carefully, speaking in reverent tones. It's doing what we've asked it to do, she said. Denny scoffed. We asked it to stop killing dolphins with straws. We didn't ask it to become my ex-wife. By the end of the week, the local news had given it a name: the self-cleaning ocean. The anchor said it with a grin that made it feel like a product feature. He stood on the sand in a windbreaker, the neatly arranged debris behind him, and told the camera the town was seeing a miracle of environmental correction. A marine biologist from the university drove down and walked the shoreline with a clipboard, bending at the waist, picking up items without disturbing the lines. She called it anomalous behavior, 3 times, like repeating the phrase might anchor it to science. Her graduate assistant followed behind and muttered, "This is either the best day of my career or the last." The mayor called a press conference. The mayor of Misthorn, because of course the town's name sounded like it came with fog, stood under a tent on the boardwalk and said, "We should view this as an opportunity. Our community has always been committed to responsible stewardship." Someone shouted, "Since when?" The mayor smiled wider. "Since now." Mara listened from the crowd, holding an iced coffee that melted too fast in the humidity. Beside her, Denny leaned in and whispered, "He's going to put it on a t-shirt." The mayor did. 2 weeks later, gift shops were selling self-cleaning ocean hoodies, with a cartoon wave giving a thumbs up. The wave had googly eyes. It looked friendly. It made the anomaly look like something you could order. The ocean continued. Every morning, the tide delivered its sorted inventory and receded, leaving the sand looking like a showroom. Some days, the categories changed. One Tuesday, the piles were all glass, each shard arranged like a mosaic. Another day, it was cigarette butts in a spiral pattern that led straight to the waterline. People started arriving from out of town. Influencers filmed themselves walking along the lines with exaggerated reverence. One woman cried for the camera and said the ocean was forgiving us. Her boyfriend held the phone steady and nodded like he understood forgiveness on an algorithmic level. Mara tried keeping her reactions appropriate. It was hard. Because she'd grown up here. She'd watched storm systems spit dead fish onto sand. She'd watched oil slicks turn the water's edge into something that looked bruised. She'd watched tourists leave their coolers and their diapers and their beer cans. And she'd watched the ocean accept it, the way it accepted everything else. The ocean had always been patient. This new behavior felt less like patience and more like decision. The first unsettling thing didn't come from the trash. It came from something else. A fisherman named Cal Hanley found it early one morning when he walked the shore before sunrise. Cal was a local fixture, the kind of a man who looked like he'd been built out of sun and salt and stubbornness. He stood over the arrangement with his hands on his hips and called the town's hotline with the same tone he used when reporting potholes. "There's bones," he said. The woman on the line paused. "Bones?" "Not driftwood bones," Cal said. Bones. Mara heard about it at the coffee shop, because Denny followed the town's scanner accounts like religion. "Cal says there's bones on the beach," Denny smiled. "Like the ocean's doing a barbecue now." Mara went after her shift, walking down to the shoreline with her phone in her pocket and a feeling in her chest that hadn't been there the previous weeks. It was an exhibit again. Of course it was. The bones were laid out in a fan shape, clean and pale, each one placed so carefully it felt respectful. But they were wrong. Not human, not fish. Not anything Mara recognized from local wildlife. They were too long, too jointed. The marine biologist returned and crouched near them, her face tight. "Cetacean?" a reporter asked. She shook her head once. "Not like any cetacean I know." Someone laughed nervously behind Mara. "Maybe it's a sea dragon." The laughter carried for a second, then died out. because the bones looked old, and yet there were no barnacles, no salt calcification. They looked cleaned by something that cared about presentation. Cal stood off to the side and said, "You know what's funny? It's not the bones that bother me." "What bothers you?" the reporter asked. Cal pointed his chin toward the ocean. "It brought them up like it wanted us to see them, like it was making a point." The university team took the bones away. The town sanitized the narrative. The mayor said it was likely an unusual whale skeleton displaced by offshore currents. Denny watched the press conference on his phone and commented, "Offshore currents. I love when the world has plausible deniability." The ocean kept cleaning. The gift shops kept selling hoodies. The town began to feel proud. That was the second unsettling thing. The pride. The subtle moral inflation. The way people spoke as if the ocean had endorsed them personally. Like the water had looked at Misthorn and said, "You're one of the good ones." Then slowly, the ocean's categories shifted. The piles of plastic and glass grew smaller. Not because the town had stopped littering. People still did. Tourists still did. The boardwalk trash cans still overflowed on weekends. But the ocean stopped returning the obvious stuff. Instead, it began returning the things that weren't supposed to be in it. Loose nails sorted by size, bent screws, rusted keys, coins that didn't match any current currency. One morning, it returned a row of wedding rings. Not just one or two, a dozen, all arranged with the stones facing upward like tiny eyes. The local police chief stood over them and joked, "Looks like the ocean's trying to tell us something about commitment." No one laughed. Mara watched the rings glitter in sunlight and felt the first real spike of fear she had since this began. It was not fear of death. It was fear of intention. Because trash was one thing. Rings were personal. That night, the ocean's sound changed. Mara noticed it while sitting on her apartment balcony, with a blanket around her shoulders. The tide had always made its familiar hush, the constant white noise people paid apps to emulate. But now there was a low underlayer, a soft drag as if something heavy was being moved across a hard surface. She thought of a broom. She thought of someone sweeping a floor. Her neighbor, Miss Pollard, stepped onto her own balcony and lit a cigarette with trembling hands. Miss Pollard was 70 and had survived everything in the tone of someone offended by mortality. "You hear that?" Mara asked. Miss Pollard exhaled smoke. "I hear everything. I can't unhear anything. That's what happens when you live long enough." "That sound," Mara pressed. Miss Pollard stared out onto the dark line of the water. "It's cleaning," she said. Mara frowned. "At night?" Miss Pollard turned slightly, cigarette ember glowing. "When else would it do it? You don't scrub a kitchen while people are eating in it." The next morning, the beach was flawless. Not clean, not tidy. Flawless. No seaweed, no driftwood, no shells, no footprints. The sand looked combed, smoothed, as if it had been poured and leveled. People arrived early, breathless, filming. "Look at this," someone shouted. "It's like a resort." Mara stood at the edge and felt an instinctive urge to step back, because the shoreline looked wrong. Too perfect, too symmetrical. The line where wet sand met dry sand was crisp as a drawn border. Denny arrived beside her with a coffee in each hand. He offered her one and said, "Congratulations, we live in the world's first self-cleaning coastline." "This doesn't feel like cleaning," Mara said. Denny sipped. No? What does it feel like? Mara watched the water. The surface was calm beyond what weather accounted for. The waves came in shallow, small, almost reluctant, as if the ocean didn't want to disturb its own work. It feels like preparation, she said. Denny snorted softly. For what? A photo shoot? Mara didn't answer. That afternoon, the mayor announced a festival. Of course he did. The Self-Cleaning Ocean Festival would include food trucks, live music, family-friendly activities, and most importantly, a commitment to ocean stewardship. The mayor said the words with the tone of someone who had discovered branding. The marine biologist was interviewed again. She looked tired now. Her hair was pulled back too tightly. She avoided direct questions. Is the ocean truly cleaning itself? The reporter asked. The biologist's smile was brittle. It appears to be removing foreign materials. Like pollution? The biologist hesitated. Like what doesn't belong. That night, the ocean returned the trash again. But it didn't sort by material. It sorted by origin. Mara went down before dawn, drawn by the same uneasy pull she couldn't name. The beach was lined with piles, each one marked by a pattern in the sand that resembled a crude label. One pile was clearly from the boardwalk. Straw wrappers, napkins, plastic forks. One pile was clearly from the marina. Rope scraps, torn bait packaging, bits of netting. One pile was from homes. Hair ties, children's toy parts, a set of house keys, a remote control. The ocean had drawn the town's fingerprints in garbage. At the center of the arrangement, placed with a kind of casual cruelty, sat a single object, a rusted kitchen knife. Someone behind Mara laughed nervously and said, Okay, now it's getting dramatic. A second voice, sharp and too loud, replied, It's art. It's making a statement. Mara didn't turn. She watched the knife. It was not sea-worn. It had no barnacle residue. It looked like it had been taken from a drawer recently and returned as evidence. The ocean was no longer just cleaning itself. It was auditing. The festival went on anyway. Food trucks lined the boardwalk, bright and cheerful. Families walked with funnel cakes and lemonade. Children wore self-cleaning ocean shirts and plastic wave hats. Someone set up a selfie station with a cardboard cutout of the cartoon wave giving a thumbs up. Denny, working the coffee booth, said, If we're going to die, I'd like to do it with sugar. Mara attempted to smile. You think we're going to die? Denny shrugged. I think we're being evaluated, which is worse. The ocean stayed calm all day, as if it appreciated the attention, as if the festival pleased it. People swam, lifeguards blew whistles half-heartedly. Teenagers posted videos with captions like, The ocean is literally healing, y'all. At sunset, the tide changed. It came in faster than predicted. Not like a storm surge, not violent, just purposeful. Like the ocean had waited all day and now had a schedule to keep. The waterline crept up the sand, smooth and even. It swallowed the footprints without froth. It slid under beach chairs and lifted them gently, carrying them back as if returning borrowed items. A man shouted, laughing, Okay, we get it. You want your chairs back. A few people laughed with him. Then the water kept coming. It moved under the boardwalk. The first plank groaned, then settled. The tide rose another inch. Another. Still no chaos. Still no wave crash. The water just advanced, calm as a hand moving across a table, clearing space. The mayor stood at the edge, shoes wet, grin fixed. "Everyone remain calm," he said into the microphone. "This is likely a higher than usual tide." Denny leaned toward Mara and murmured, "He says that like the ocean will hear him and go, 'Oh, sorry, my bad.'" Mara watched the water. It climbed the steps of the boardwalk in a thin sheet. It reached the food trucks and soaked their tires. It moved around people without splashing them, like it knew where bodies were and chose not to touch. Yet. A woman called, "Is this safe?" The lifeguard, a teenage boy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, shouted back, "Probably." The ocean's surface near shore began to shimmer with something like fine particulate. Tiny fragments suspended in the water, catching light. At first, Mara assumed it was sand. Then she saw it wasn't. It was too uniform, too white. It reminded her of the bones. The marine biologist pushed through the crowd, her face pale. She shouted something to the mayor, who leaned down, annoyed. Mara couldn't hear the words, but saw the biologist's hand gesture toward the waterline, palm down, pressing as if trying to push it away. The mayor's smile faltered. He raised the microphone again. "Everyone, please move back from the shoreline. This is..." The ocean reached the cardboard wave cutout. It tipped it over gently and carried it away. People laughed again. That nervous laughter that happens when the world behaves like a prank, right up until it doesn't. Then the ocean did something it hadn't yet done. It started sorting while it moved. Not on the sand. In place. The water around the nearest people began to thin, clarifying to an impossible transparency. Mara could see through it to the sand beneath, and could see things within the water, tiny particles swirling, gathering around certain objects, around a plastic cup, around a discarded fork, around a cluster of cigarette butts. The particles clung, aggregated, and then, quietly, lifted those objects out of the water, disposing them into a growing pile near the base of the boardwalk stairs. It was cleaning while advancing. It was not retreating. It was optimizing. Denny whispered, "Okay, that's impressive." Mara's throat went dry. "It's not just picking up trash." Denny frowned. "What else is it picking up?" Mara watched the particles gather around a man's ankle. Not a piece of litter, not a shoe. His skin. The man laughed, feeling the tug. "Hey, what is that?" The particulate thickened, turning milky around his foot. The water did not churn. It did not thrash. It simply held his ankle like a hand closing. Then, with a smoothness that made Mara's stomach flip, the ocean pulled. The man stumbled forward, surprised more than afraid. People reached for him. Hands grabbed his shirt. The ocean's pull increased by degrees, not jerks. The man's feet slid on the wet wood. His expression changed. Confusion, giving way to a sudden, childish panic. "Stop," he said. And it was not a command. It was a plea. Two people held him. Someone shouted for help. The crowd pressed in. The mayor's microphone squealed, dropped. The ocean patiently, cleanly, took him anyway. Not by drowning, not by wave, by extraction. The particulate wrapped his ankles, then his calves. His body moved like it was being pulled on a conveyor belt. The helpers slipped. The man's hands flailed, caught briefly on a boardwalk post, then slid off as though the ocean had lubricated the world. He vanished into knee-deep water. No splash, no thrashing, just absence. The waterline remained calm. Someone screamed. The town fully understood. It had been celebrating the wrong miracle. The marine biologist shouted, voice breaking. "It's removing contaminants." The word hit Mara like a cold coin dropped into her stomach. Contaminants. Foreign materials. What doesn't belong. The ocean had cleaned the beach. Then it had cleaned the boardwalk. Now it was cleaning the people. Because people were the consistent variable, the source of every pile. Denny grabbed Mara's arm. "We need to go." They moved with the crowd, bodies bumping, breath ragged. People shouted, argued, demanded explanations like explanations mattered. A man yelled, "It's just a riptide." A woman yelled back, "Riptides don't sort recycling." The ocean moved through the festival grounds like a slow, unstoppable sweep. It lifted plastic chairs and carried them away. It deposited them in neat lines behind it, as if returning items to storage. It reached the first food truck and paused, only for a moment, as if assessing. Then the truck's loose trash, napkins, wrappers, cups, lifted and floated toward the pile. The truck itself remained, for now. The ocean wasn't mindless. It was methodical. Mara and Denny reached the street level, climbing away from the boardwalk. Behind them, the crowd surged, some still filming, because even terror was content now. Denny breathed hard, said, "Okay, so hypothetically, if the ocean is cleaning—" "Don't say it like that," Mara snapped. He blinked. "Like what?" "Like it's a Roomba," she said. "Like it's cute." Denny's humor wavered, then returned, thin. "I'm trying not to scream." They ran, up the street, past the souvenir shops, past the self-cleaning ocean hoodies hanging in windows like bad jokes, past the mayor's campaign signs that suddenly felt like they belonged to a different reality. From the hill, Mara looked back. The ocean had reached the road, not as a wave, as a line. It moved into town with patient intent, filtering as it went. The water flowed around parked cars, lifting loose trash from gutters. It slid into storm drains and came up in other places like it already knew the map. It was cleaning the infrastructure. It was cleaning the flow paths. It was cleaning the town. The next morning, Misthorn was quieter. Not because people were calm, because there were fewer people. The news called it an unprecedented tidal event. Officials used words like anomaly and evacuation. The footage on social media blurred the moment of extraction, because platforms flagged it as violent content, as if removing it from feeds could remove it from the world. Mara sat in her apartment with curtains open, listening. The ocean's sound carried further now. A low, steady hush. The tide had receded overnight, but it had left something behind. The streets were free of litter, the gutters clean, the beach perfect, the boardwalk scrubbed, the festival debris gone. The ocean had even returned the lost things. Rings, keys, coins, in neat arrays at the shoreline like a final invoice. And at the center of those arrays, there was a new category. It took Mara a moment to recognize it. Clothing. Folded, sorted by size, shoes lined in pairs, a child's jacket laid flat like a pressed leaf. The ocean had not left bodies. It had left evidence of removal. Denny sent her a text. "You awake?" Mara stared at the message and felt how thin her hands looked around her phone. "Yeah," she typed. A pause. Then, "We always joked it would take the trash out." Mara swallowed. It did. Another pause. Then Denny. "Do you think it's done?" Mara stood and walked to the window again. The ocean looked serene, healthy, beautiful in the way it always had, the way it had tricked people into thinking beauty meant safety. At the shoreline, the waterline sat perfectly still, a crisp border where wet met dry. It looked like a line you could step over, if you were foolish enough to pretend the ocean was a place you still visited. Mara watched the surface. For a moment, she thought she saw small pale fragments swirling beneath it, like fine silt, like bones, like particles waiting for the next category. Her phone buzzed with a push notification from the town's tourism board, scheduled and automated and obvious. Misthorn announces Self-Cleaning Ocean Festival returns next year. Mara stared at it until the words stopped looking like language and started looking like something else. Like the town itself had become trash, neatly labeled for removal. She typed back to Denny with fingers that felt too slow. "It's not done. It just finished the easy part." Story 2. Unfiltered. The faucet arrived in a box that promised harmony, which should have unsettled Katie more than it did. Products that promise happiness are one thing. Products that promise the removal of unhappiness feel surgical. The packaging was matte white, no aggressive branding, just a soft silver line of text. Aqua Calm. Filter what you don't need. It sat on the kitchen counter, between a stack of unopened mail and a fruit bowl that held 2 aging apples and an argument neither of them had finished the week before. Eli slit the tape carefully, like he was opening something ceremonial rather than something plumbed. He had been researching it for months. "It doesn't remove emotion," he'd explained more than once. "It dampens volatility. It filters trace stress responses in the water that amplify tension." The language had comforted him. It sounded engineered. It sounded rational. It sounded like something that would fix the small fractures that began appearing in their conversations. The short fuses, the quick silences, the fatigue that made every disagreement feel larger than it was. When they turned it on for the first time, the water did not gush. It flowed, quietly. Not silent, but softened, as if the sound had been padded by felt. Katie drank first. The water tasted clean in the way municipal water sometimes pretends to be. But there was an absence she couldn't name. Not sweetness, not mineral. Just subtraction. "It's smoother," Eli said after his own sip, and smiled like he had proven something. Over the next few days, the house changed without changing. The kitchen still creaked at night. The refrigerator still hummed. But arguments that would have sparked flared briefly and then dissolved before ignition. When Eli forgot to pick up Katie's dry cleaning, she felt the shape of irritation forming inside her chest, and then watched it soften, like ice submerged in warm water. She nodded, It's fine. He nodded back. We'll get it tomorrow. The moment ended without friction, without residue. They both experienced a mild, almost clinical relief, as though a small procedure had been completed successfully. It felt like maturity. It felt like progress. It felt suspiciously easy. Their friends noticed before they did. At dinner one Friday, Leah leaned back in her chair and studied them the way you study a couple who claims they've worked things out. You two are calm, she said carefully, as if diagnosing a rare condition. Did you start therapy or join a cult? We upgraded the faucet, Eli said lightly, and laughed at his own phrasing. Grant blinked. Your plumbing fixed your marriage? It's bioadaptive filtration, Eli explained, gesturing toward the sink. Reduces emotional volatility. Leah poured herself water from the tap and took a sip, eyebrows lifting slightly. That's nice, she admitted, the words stretching her mouth like something she didn't fully trust. The faucet glowed faintly at its base when in use, a soft blue pulse that reflected off the backsplash at night like distant lighting underwater. The manual mentioned active resonance. It did not mention that the color would change. 2 weeks later, the glow shifted from blue to a muted green. Katie noticed it at 3 a.m. when she came into the kitchen barefoot, unable to sleep. The house was still, but beneath that stillness was a hum, so faint she might have imagined it, a rhythmic vibration threaded through the pipes. She filled a glass and watched the water catch the green light. It looked thicker, not visibly, not scientifically, but in the way syrup looks thicker than water because your mind expects resistance. She drank anyway. The next morning, her boss eliminated her position with the kind of apologetic corporate tone designed to erase responsibility. Reconstructing, he said, and she nodded with a composure that startled even her. She drove home, told Eli, and waited for grief to crest. It didn't. He hugged her gently, told her they would adapt, and the word adapt slid into her like something pre-approved. She poured herself another glass from the faucet and felt the edges of whatever hurt might have formed smooth over before they could take shape. That was the first time she felt something missing. Not pain, the right to pain. Eli spent more time in the kitchen after that, standing at the sink longer than thirst required. He claimed he liked the taste. He liked the clarity. It's like everything unnecessary is gone, he said once, staring at the stream as if it were a horizon. What counts as unnecessary? Katie asked. He didn't answer immediately. Noise, he said finally. Spikes. Overreactions. And if the spike is telling you something? He smiled faintly, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Then maybe it doesn't need to be that loud. The hum deepened in the following days, no longer something you could ignore if you were paying attention. It pulsed behind the drywall, beneath the tile. Katie found herself listening for it, in the way you listen for a child breathing in another room. It had become part of the architecture. Their friends returned for dinner again, and the conversation drifted toward betrayal, near accidents, grievances, the usual social choreography of adults comparing scars. Yet none of the stories landed with weight. They passed across the table like harmless weather reports. Leah laughed too loudly at one point and then stopped mid-sound, embarrassed by her own volume. This is strange, Grant muttered, swirling water in his glass. We're not reacting. Reacting to what? Eli asked mildly. To anything, Grant said. And the word anything hung in the air longer than it should have. That night, Katie dreamed of standing at a shoreline made of tile instead of sand, the horizon defined by a faucet the size of a lighthouse. Beneath the surface of the water were faces, calm and expressionless, drifting in perfect symmetry. They opened their mouths, but nothing emerged. She woke to the sound of running water. Eli stood at the sink in the dark, green light painting his face in aquatic tones. The faucet was on, though he did not appear to be drinking. He was simply watching. It's 3 a.m, she said. It's always 3 somewhere, he replied, and the sentence felt detached from context, as if he had borrowed it from an instructional video. The water shimmered differently now. It did not splash against the basin so much as settle. The hum had grown confident. The next day, Katie bought bottled water. Eli noticed immediately. You don't trust it. I want to feel something unfiltered, she said. We feel things. Do we? The question came out sharper than she intended, and she felt a flicker, a small, jagged alive. It was almost a relief. He stepped closer to the sink as if drawn. It makes everything manageable, he said quietly. It filters what doesn't belong. Emotion doesn't belong, she thought. That was the logic emerging. Emotion was variance. Variance was instability. Instability was contamination. The faucet turned on without being touched. Water flowed in a steady column, the green glow bleaching toward white. The hum vibrated through the cabinets, through the soles of her feet, into the soft center of her skull. The air felt dense, pressurized, as if the kitchen itself were underwater. Eli stepped into the stream, letting it coat his hands. He did not flinch. You don't have to fight it, he said, voice level and even. We don't need all that chaos. She felt it then, the pressure against her thoughts, not invasive, but persuasive. The way a system scans for anomalies, for spikes, for contamination. She grabbed the bottled water from the counter and drank, and the sharpness returned in a flash. Grief for the job, resentment for the quiet way he had installed something that altered them both. Memory of arguments that hurt and healed and meant something. The pressure recoiled slightly. The water from the faucet thickened mid-air, not visibly gelatinous, but wrong in its obedience. It expanded across the counter, flowing around objects rather than over them, tracing edges as if mapping the room. It was not flooding. It was evaluating. Eli, she whispered, and saw in his expression a smoothness that terrified her more than anger ever had. He looked peaceful. He looked empty. It's almost done, he said. Done with what? Filtering. She moved toward the sink, every step heavy with the awareness that what she was defending was not comfort, but friction. She wrapped her hands around the base of the faucet. The metal was hot, humming beneath her skin. The system pressed against her again, seeking equilibrium. She thought of the fight they had had about moving cities, the one that had left them raw and shaking and closer afterward. She thought of laughter that had come from irritation. She thought of tears that had mattered. She screamed. Not a controlled sound, but a measured one. A jagged, ugly, unapproved noise that fractured the air. The hum stuttered. The water faltered. The white glow flickered. She twisted. The faucet tore free in a shriek of metal, and the water burst outward, not in neat lines, not in careful flow, but in chaotic spray that soaked the cabinets, the walls, the ceiling. The hum shattered into silence. For a moment, the only sound was water hitting tile in uneven rhythm. Eli blinked as if waking from a shallow sleep. He looked at his hands, then at her. "What happened?" he asked. And there was a confusion in his voice now. Human, imperfect, confusion. Katie sank to her knees in the flooded kitchen, clothes clinging, heart pounding, lungs burning. The pain came all at once. Fear, anger, grief, love, exhaustion. Unfiltered and overwhelming. It hurt. It was unbearable. It was alive. Outside, faint and distant, sirens began to wail. Somewhere else in the city, another faucet hummed confidently in another kitchen, filtering, leveling, smoothing the rough edges of someone else's marriage, someone else's grief. Katie sat in the water and listened to her own breathing. Uneven and loud. The house felt different now. Less calm, less polished, messier. Human. On the counter, the torn faucet lay silent, its white glow extinguished. But beneath the silence, in the walls, in the pipes that connected house to house to house, she thought she could still feel faint vibration, like something patient, something systemic, recalculating what counted as contamination. And for the first time since the box had arrived, promising harmony, she understood that the system had not been designed to remove anger. It had been designed to remove resistance. Story 3. The Dock Monster. It began with a chair. Not a person, not a boat, not even a pet, which would have been simpler to categorize. Just a folding aluminum lawn chair that belonged to Dennis Harrow and had survived 3 summers, 2 storms, and 1 incident involving lighter fluid and a nephew. Dennis found it at dawn, floating upside down near the edge of his dock, one leg twisted inward like someone had tested it for weakness and been unimpressed. "Wind," he muttered, though the air that morning was so still the lake looked laminated. He lifted the chair out of the water and set it back in place. The metal felt colder than it should have. The lake stretched flat and reflective before him. The opposite shoreline, a smudge of pine in early fog. It was quiet enough that a creak in the dockboards under his feet sounded theatrical. He didn't mention the displaced chair to anyone, until the cooler went missing. By the end of the week, the pattern emerged. Dennis's cooler was found 30 feet from where he'd left it, flipped and emptied, its lid carefully detached and placed beside it like a removed hat. Across the cove, the Feldmans' decorative tiki torches were uprooted and arranged in a neat triangle at the end of their dock. On the north side, the Callahans discovered their wooden bench split cleanly down the center. Not splintered, not smashed, but parted. The halves placed parallel to each other like something anatomical. Not one boat was damaged, not one dock plank displaced. Just the furniture. The lake had preferences. At the next homeowners association meeting, held in the rec center with its faint smell of chlorine and old coffee, everyone tried very hard to sound reasonable. "It's probably teenagers," Miss Feldman said, arms crossed tightly. "They've been bored since school let out." "Teenagers don't separate hinges without stripping screws," Dennis replied, holding up his cooler lid like evidence in court. The hinge pins had been slid out cleanly, metal unbent. "That's considerate vandalism," someone offered weakly. Sheriff Malloy, who owned a cabin at the south end, and therefore wore both a badge and flip-flops, cleared his throat. "We've had no reports of intruders. No tire tracks, no footprints. I walked the shoreline myself." "And?" asked Miss Callahan. "And there weren't any," he said. The room went still, in that specific way adults achieve when they are collectively deciding not to escalate. "So," Dennis said slowly, "the lake got up in the night and reorganized my patio?" A nervous ripple of laughter passed through the room, thin and brittle. The first video surfaced 2 days later. A motion sensor camera mounted by a new resident, a software engineer who trusted data more than neighbors, captured a faint disturbance at 2:14 a.m. The footage was grainy and underexposed, but clear enough to make everyone uncomfortable. The lake did not thrash. It did not surge. A section of water near the dock seemed to rise, not like a wave, but like a vertical column, lifting carefully upward. Within it, something long and jointed shifted just beneath the surface. The water held its shape longer than physics should have allowed. A plastic Adirondack chair began to move. Not dragged, lifted. It hovered for a moment, suspended in the vertical sheen of water, then was carried 30 feet down the dock and set gently at its edge. The column receded. The surface flattened. The night resumed. The comments beneath the shared video were predictable. Fake, AI-generated, wind shear anomaly, lake ghost, LOL. Dennis watched it 3 times and said nothing. The thing, whatever it was, had not damaged the chair. It had relocated it, measured it, judged it. The attacks escalated. Umbrellas snapped at the joints, fabric folded neatly beside the broken poles. Rope lights pulled free from railings, bulbs stacked in a tidy pile and collected like teeth. A child's inflatable swan was punctured once, precisely, and left deflated at the water's edge, its cartoon eyes staring accusingly at no one in particular. Still no boats touched. Still no docks compromised. The lake seemed uninterested in structure, only in what rested on it. Another HOA meeting. Tension sharpened. "This is harassment," Miss Feldman declared. "By what?" Dennis asked. "By something." Sheriff Malloy leaned back in his chair. "Let's say, hypothetically, we're dealing with wildlife." "Wildlife that unscrews bolts?" Dennis replied. Malloy sighed. "I'm not saying it's unscrewing bolts." "It's unscrewing bolts," Dennis said flatly. Silence fell again, heavy and humid. "What if it's territorial?" someone whispered. The word landed wrong. Territorial implied ownership. The first person to suggest feeding it was Chris Benton, 23, home from college and armed with confidence that had not yet been tested. "If it's targeting objects," he said on the dock one evening, beer in hand, "maybe it's responding to density, surface clutter. We clear the furniture, it chills out." Dennis stared at him. "You want me to store my deck chairs because the lake has aesthetic standards?" "I'm saying maybe it wants space." The sun dipped lower, orange sliding across the water like a warning. The docks creaked as if setting under a weight that wasn't visible. Dennis looked down at his own setup. 2 chairs, a small table, a cooler. The ritual of summer. The casual occupation of shoreline. "It's a lake," he said finally. "It doesn't want anything." The water lapped softly against the posts. Patient. That night, the docks were stripped. Not destroyed, stripped. Every piece of detachable furniture, chairs, tables, coolers, umbrellas, was gone by morning. They were not floating away. They were not scattered. They were assembled. All of it. Every chair from every dock, every table, every lantern, every decorative buoy, was arranged in a wide arc at the center of the lake, anchored somehow in shallow water that should not have supported it. From shore, it looked like an amphitheater, facing the houses, facing the people. Dennis stood beside Miss Feldman and watched the sunrise behind the assembled furniture, casting long skeletal shadows toward the shoreline. "It's mocking us," she whispered. "It's organizing us," Dennis corrected. Sheriff Malloy arrived late, removed his sunglasses, and stared at the lake as if it had filed a complaint he did not want to read. The furniture arc was precise, measured, equidistant, not random at all. The next night, the docks were empty. No one dared return the furniture. They sat on bare planks or stood with their hands in pockets, unsure what posture signaled compliance. Dennis lay awake, listening. Around 2 a.m., the lake shifted. He stepped onto his porch and watched as the arc of furniture in the center began to sink, not violently but steadily, descending into black water like a curtain lowering at the end of a performance. One chair tipped slightly as it went under. It looked like a bow. The surface closed without a ripple. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then the lake rose, not in waves, in breadth. The waterline advanced up the docks by inches, slow and methodical, testing each board. It reached the first house's bottom step and paused, as if measuring. Dennis felt it then. Not fear exactly, but recognition. The furniture had never been the target. It had been the warning. The lake was not attacking dock furniture. It was removing the parts of the docks that made them livable. Temporary, recreational, human. The boards beneath his feet creaked as the water pressed higher. Not to flood, to reclaim. Miss Feldman's voice carried faintly across the dark. "It just wanted the clutter gone." Dennis watched the lake smooth itself under his property line. "No," he said quietly. "It wanted the line gone." The water advanced another inch. The docks groaned under pressure, but did not yet break. The lake did not rush. It did not rage. It simply continued. Patient, territorial. And for the first time since the chair had flipped, Dennis understood that the monster in the lake had not been hungry. It had been measuring. And now that it had cleared the surface, it was ready to adjust the boundary. By dawn, the docks would be shorter. By summer's end, the shoreline would be different. And there would be no furniture left to pretend otherwise. Story 4. Exhibit Expansion. The gift shop expanded quietly, which is how most invasive things prefer to grow. It began as a temporary holiday extension, an extra rack of plush dolphins near the exit, a seasonal display of glittering snow globes filled with artificial coral. The signage insisted it was a limited retail experience enhancement. Visitors accepted this the way visitors accept most things inside a curated space, with a shrug and a credit card. The aquarium had once been dim and reverent. Light bent through thick glass and fractured across tiled floors. Children pressed hands to tanks and left damp fingerprints that staff wiped away with patient cloths. There had been a sense of scale, water rising above eye level, fish gliding with indifference. The exhibits made people small. Then the walls shifted. A hallway narrowed. A corner that had housed a touch pool was repainted and stocked with reusable tote bags. The jellyfish exhibit lost 2 cylindrical tanks, replaced by a shelving unit of resin-encased, authentic marine sand. No one made an announcement about the removals. The animals were described as relocated for enrichment or participating in conservation partnerships. The place cards remained longer than the creatures did, as if the idea of them was sufficient. Employees noticed first, because employees always notice what shrinks before management does. "It feels shorter," one of the attendants said one morning while scanning tickets beneath a banner that read, "Bring the ocean home." "Shorter how?" another replied. "Like the path," she said. "We used to pass 3 reef tanks before the shark tunnel. Now it's 2. The filtration systems hummed behind the walls, consistent and mechanical. But there was an emptiness beneath the sound, as if the building had begun inhaling less deeply. The octopus disappeared without ceremony. The tank was drained overnight and left dark. A place card explained that the animal had been transferred for research. The next day, a display of plush octopi appeared in the gift shop. Soft, symmetrical, smiling. Children grabbed them without noticing the absence in the glass room down the hall. The tank looked larger when empty. The water in the remaining exhibits seemed clearer. The gift shop expanded again. What had once been a corridor lined with tide pool photographs became a boutique alcove for scented candles labeled Low Tide, Deep Current, Salt Memory. A former maintenance closet opened into a display of bottled exhibit water, limited batch. The bottles were sealed with wax and stamped with a logo shaped like a starfish. "Is it really from the tanks?" a visitor asked one afternoon. "Yes," the attendant said after a pause. It was technically true. It had been siphoned from the saltwater system during routine maintenance. "It feels authentic," the visitor replied, holding the bottle to the light as if expecting movement within it. Behind her, the reef tank glowed faintly. Fewer fish circled than there had been a week before. The staff meeting took place in a room that had once housed seahorses. The tanks were gone, replaced by whiteboards and folding chairs. A digital presentation flickered against one far wall, outlining Phase 2 of the visitor optimization strategy. Words like engagement, conversion, and tangible takeaway appeared in clean, confident font. "We have to adapt," management said, hands clasped gently at the waist. "Guests connect with experiences they can hold." "What about the animals?" someone asked. A polite smile answered, "We are allocating resources." "To where?" "To where they matter most." No one asked what mattered most. The hum in the walls filled the silence. The shark tunnel dimmed next. Half the water was drained overnight, leaving the curved glass arching over an empty blue cavity. A sign appeared explaining that the sharks were participating in an interfacility breeding initiative. In the lobby, a new installation replaced the entrance to the tunnel. A life-size fiberglass shark, suspended midair, surrounded by racks of themed apparel. Children posed for photos underneath it. "It's like the real thing," one said, clutching a plastic cup of cotton candy shaped like coral. The filtration hum deepened. Employees began to notice something stranger than the shrinking exhibits. The water in the remaining tanks did not ripple as it once had. The fish moved, but the surface tension held too steady, as if the water had grown thicker. The gift shop lighting brightened incrementally, its warmth spilling onto what had once been darker corridors. The scent of new fabric and packaging overpowered the briny air. Visitors spent more time in the shop than in front of the tanks, They compared plush textures. They debated candle fragrances. They lifted bottles of exhibit water and held them to their ears, as if they could hear waves trapped inside. One evening, during closing rounds, an attendant walked the perimeter of the largest remaining tank, the central column of salt water that rose 2 stories and housed the last collection of reef fish. The building was quiet. Fluorescent lights dimmed. The hum persisted. She stood before the glass and felt a faint vibration beneath her fingertips. The water inside did not move, yet something within it shifted. Not a fish, not debris, but a density, subtle and deliberate. The water seemed to lean toward the glass, as if curious. She stepped back. Behind her, in the gift shop, shelves creaked softly under the weight of inventory. The next week, the central tank was reduced by 1/3. A temporary wall of merchandise stood where visitors once circled the water column. Only one side of the tank remained visible now, like a framed painting. The fish swam within the narrowed space, their paths compressed. "They look crowded," someone murmured. "They'll adapt," management replied. Adapt. The word echoed differently now. The bottled exhibit water began selling out daily. Customers described it as energized, alive. Some claimed that when they shook the bottles gently, the contents resisted. An employee accidentally dropped one during restocking. It did not shatter. It thudded against the tile and rolled upright. The water inside swirled once, then stilled. The filtration hum spread. It no longer felt confined to the walls. It resonated through the floorboards, up through the soles of shoes. Staff members found themselves pausing mid-conversation, listening without knowing why. One morning, the final reef tank was gone. In its place stood an expensive retail display shaped like an aquarium. Glass walls enclosing shelves of merchandise arranged in neat aquatic tiers. From a distance, it resembled a tank full of color. Up close, it was fabric and plastic and wax. Visitors did not complain. They wandered the widened aisles, remarking on how open it felt now, how bright, how accessible. The building seemed larger without the water. The last remaining saltwater system, hidden in the maintenance wing, continued humming. No exhibits remained, no animals, only the sound. One attendant followed it late one evening, drawn through the back corridors, past storage rooms and supply crates. The hum grew louder as she approached the source, until it vibrated in her rib cage. The maintenance door was ajar. Inside, where tanks once connected to filtration pumps, stood rows of bottled water. Hundreds of them, thousands, each filled from the last system that had circulated brine through empty glass. The water in bottles moved faintly, not sloshing, but pulsing, as if breathing. She stepped closer. The bottles nearest the door tilted almost imperceptibly in her direction. The hum rose, not mechanical, expectant. The next morning, the aquarium reopened as usual. The sign outside had been updated. Marine Experience Center. Shop the Sea. Families entered and emerged carrying bags heavy with plush and glass and sealed authenticity. Children asked where the sharks had gone. "They're still here," parents said vaguely, gesturing toward the themed decor. Behind the counter, the bottled water display glowed beneath soft lighting. Labels shimmered. The water within appeared clear, pure, perfect. In the walls, the hum continued. There were no tanks left to contain it. In the widening retail space, beneath banners that read, "Bring the ocean home," something patient adjusted to its new enclosure. The gift shop had not expanded to make room. It had expanded to replace. And somewhere beyond the bright aisles and polished shelves, the idea of the ocean, stripped of depth, stripped of unpredictability, waited in neat rows, sealed and for sale, learning how to move without glass between it and the people who had come only to look. Story 5. The Beneath. The first report described it as a shadow, which is how men trained in machinery tend to describe anything organic that refuses to behave like equipment. The maintenance submersible had been descending along the outer edge of the offshore mining platform, lights cutting a pale cone through suspended sediment, when something larger than the vehicle moved beyond the beam. Not darting, not attacking, simply maintaining pace. The pilot said it matched their depth within seconds. The engineer laughed when he filed the note. "Big fish," he said. "Ocean's got those." The second report used the word whale, because scale demands familiarity. The shape had been long and rigid, with a curvature that implied mass beyond reasonable tonnage. It did not breach. It did not roll. It did not vocalize in frequencies picked up by the onboard hydrophones. It moved beside the submersible like a colleague observing procedure. "They're social," one technician said during the debrief. "Whales. Curious." "This one doesn't surface," the pilot replied. "Maybe it's shy." The third report stopped joking. The submersible had descended to the base of Turbine Array 7, tasked with inspecting a structural anomaly in the anchoring frame. The mining operation had been extracting rare earth sediment from the seabed for 3 years, grinding and siphoning material through reinforced conduits that pulsed day and night. The ocean above tolerated it with indifferent surface calm. Below, things rearranged. The shadow returned at 1,200 meters. This time, it did not remain at the periphery of the light. It moved into it. The cameras captured an elongated form, textured not like smooth whale skin, but like layered sediment hardened into ridges. It had no visible eyes, but the front of its mass angled toward the submarine's cockpit with deliberate alignment. The pilot felt something like being inspected, though no instrument registered contact. "Is it close?" the engineer asked over comms. "It's pacing," the pilot said. "Exactly pacing." "How close?" "Close enough to touch." The engineer swallowed audibly through the headset. The creature did not collide. It did not bump. It matched their speed, their depth, their minor adjustments. When the submersible tilted to better view the turbine frame, the creature shifted its own angle fractionally, as if calibrating for perspective. The footage circulated among management before it reached the public. The official statement described an unidentified marine organism exhibiting non-aggressive tracking behavior. Internally, the language sharpened. Assess risk. Determine territorial patterns. Review extraction impact. The extraction continued. The next week, the creature appeared at 2 separate arrays simultaneously. At least that was the implication. 2 submersibles, operating miles apart, reported identical shadows maintaining parallel depth. The hydrophone logs recorded no whale song, no clicks, no communication signals, only the steady churn of mining equipment and the low unclassified vibration beneath it. "That's impossible," one analyst said. "It's the same one," another insisted, "and they're overestimating size." The footage did not agree. The creature's mass extended beyond the submersible's full frame. Its ridges bore patterns that did not match in each recording, as if the sediment along its body shifted over time. It did not approach the turbines. It did not disrupt the suction lines. It remained adjacent to the machines that descended to inspect them. It followed submarines. The workers began calling it the auditor. "Make sure your bolts are tight," someone joked in the break room. "The auditor's watching." Laughter followed, thin and practiced. The company installed additional external cameras on the submersibles. They deployed sonar mapping sweeps designed to trace the creature's full outline. The sonar returned noise, not interference, not static, just absence where mass should have reflected signal. "It's absorbing it," a system technician muttered, reviewing the data. "Absorbing what?" "The ping." The extraction intensified. Production quotas had already been promised to investors. The turbines drilled deeper. The suction systems extended further into sediment that had remained undisturbed for a millennia. The seabed shifted in subtle ways that the engineers framed as manageable instability. On the 9th descent after the creature's first confirmed appearance, the pilot noticed something new. The shadow did not simply pace. It mirrored. When the submersible extended its manipulator arm to adjust a loosened bracket, the creature's forward mass extended slightly from its body, an appendage of compressed sediment and pressure, imitating the movement without touching. When the submersible's lights dimmed momentarily during a power calibration, the creature's surface darkened in synchronization. "It's copying us," the pilot whispered. "Copying how?" the engineer asked. "Learning." The hydrophones registered a new sound then. Not a call nor a cry. A low-frequency oscillation that did not transmit through water so much as through structure. The metal hull vibrated faintly, as if responding to an internal resonance. The creature did not attack. It did not flee. It remained. The next malfunction was not violent. Turbine Array 3 shut down during routine extraction. No alarms, no sparks. The system simply ceased operation. The power readings remained stable. The machinery did not appear damaged. It was as if something had decided that the array had reached sufficient output and flipped a switch. The submersible descended to investigate. The creature was already there. It hovered beside the silent turbine, its ridges pulsing slowly. The oscillation transmitted again, stronger now. The pilot felt the vibration in his teeth. The manipulator arm extended toward the turbine's intake valve. The creature's appendage extended too. This time, it touched. The contact did not dent metal. It did not scrape. The sediment-like surface pressed gently against the intake and held there, as if measuring texture, pressure, yield. The turbine did not restart. The creature withdrew its appendage and resumed pacing. "It's not attacking," the engineer said through clenched teeth. "It's calibrating." The phrase settled over the control room like condensation. The next day, a second array shut down. Then a third. No explosions, No dramatic failures, just silence. The creature appeared at each disabled site in turn, maintaining its position beside any submersible dispatched to inspect the outage. It did not interfere with vehicles. It did not block their path. It followed. Production fell below sustainable levels. The company considered temporary suspension. The board arranged emergency meetings that did not include the pilots, who had seen the creature up close. "We cannot attribute mechanical failure to fauna," an executive insisted. "It's not fauna," someone replied quietly. The final descent occurred under mounting pressure to restore functionality. The submersible was outfitted with an experimental sonar capable of higher penetration depth. The pilot had not slept. The engineer had stopped joking. At 1,400 meters, the creature appeared again. Closer. The pilot angled the sub toward the disabled intake valve. The creature matched the movement precisely, closing distance by increments too subtle to register as threat, but too deliberate to ignore. The oscillation intensified, vibrating through the hull in a pattern that began to resemble rhythm rather than noise. The pilot realized then that the oscillation aligned with the submersible's internal power cycle. Each time the battery output surged to compensate for pressure, the creature's ridges pulsed in harmony. "It's sinking," the engineer whispered. The manipulator arm extended. The creature extended. When metal met sediment this time, the contact held longer. The oscillation rose in frequency until it blurred into something like song. The submersible's systems flickered. Not failed, flickered. The pilot felt the hull's vibration shift from external resonance to internal echo, as if the machine were beginning to respond to a rhythm not of its own design. "Pull back," the engineer said. The pilot attempted to reverse thrusters. The controls responded sluggishly. The creature did not tighten its hold. It simply maintained proximity. The oscillation deepened. On the surface, control monitors displayed stable vitals for both crew members and machine. Below, something altered. The submersible's navigation system recalibrated without command, adjusting its heading by 3 degrees. The pilot corrected it. The system adjusted again, 1 degree further. "It's not us," the pilot said, breath shallow. The creature's ridges pulsed in slow, measured contraction. The suction lines of the nearest turbine began to hum in the same frequency. On shore, the control room lights dimmed for half a second, then steadied. The submersible's sonar finally returned a full image. Not of a whale, not of any recognizable organism. The creature extended far beyond the frame. Not a single body, but a network of pressure-dense structures threaded through sediment, anchored across the entire extraction field. What they had assumed was one animal was merely a protrusion, a nerve. The turbines had not been drilling through inert seabed. They had been mining a body. The creature did not destroy the submersible. It did not need to. The oscillation shifted. The submersible's internal systems aligned to it, one by one, until the machine's power cycle matched the external rhythm exactly. The pilot felt the hum inside his chest, mirroring the hull's vibration. "It's not following us," the engineer said, voice hollow. "It's teaching us." On shore, the turbines restarted, not under human command. They began drawing not sediment, but seawater, reversing flow in a slow, controlled surge that pulsed through conduits toward the platform above. The creature's protrusion withdrew from the submersible's hull and drifted backward into darkness. It no longer needed to pace. The submersible rose to the surface, systems intact, crew alive, data corrupted beyond usefulness. In the weeks that followed, the mining platform continued operating. Officially, the extraction logs recorded output in neat columns. Unofficially, the flow patterns had reversed. The turbines no longer pulled from the seabed. They circulated seawater through newly formed channels beneath the sediment, guided by oscillations that no longer originated from human machinery. The creature did not surface. It did not attack. It remained below, its network of rigid mass adjusting incrementally to each mechanical descent, sinking, recalibrating. The submarines still went down, and each time they did, something vast moved beside them, patient and immense. No longer a follower, but a companion, ensuring that the machines learned the rhythm of the ocean, before the ocean decided to teach them by force. Above, the water remained calm. Below, the extraction field pulsed in harmony with something older than turbines. The whale had never been hunting. It had been observing. And now, the machines moved to its beat. This was The Beneath, a collection of odd tales. A Boohouse Books production. Created and narrated by Mark Steven Nordlund. BoohouseBooks.com.